You can rest easy, everybody. There is not a boat or a cruise ship in sight in this movie. What is going on, guys? Welcome to my review of Scream 6. Finally here, just about a year and a couple of months after the last installment. It seems like a franchise that is just full steam ahead, and it has been one of my most anticipated films of the year, certainly the first part of the year. And all of the early reactions, the trailers, some of the buzz that I've heard has led me to believe this was going to be one of the best Scream movies, at least one of the best Scream sequels, if nothing else, which, to be honest with you, I think the Scream franchise is easily the most consistent as far as quality across any of the slasher franchises, so I had no reason to expect any less. So you have the same group of characters that we were introduced to in Scream 5, the two sisters, the two twins that are the survivors. You still have some of the legacy characters sticking around. Obviously, Neve Campbell was not going to be a part of this film. That was a big media thing going on where there was issues where it was initially reported that there wasn't a spot for her in the script, and then she replied and said that she refused to be in the movie because of a pay difference, and that went on for a couple of months. It was a big topic of debate within the horror community, but we do get Courtney Cox here, as well as those characters from the previous film, and they have moved on to New York City. Aside from the little stint in LA in Scream 3, this is the first time that we have really ventured out to a new setting in this franchise, away from Woodsboro, and that was one of the elements that I was actually most excited about, was the potential, whether visually or just logistically with chase scenes or kill scenes, what was that going to do to change up the dynamic of a Scream film. Starting off with the positives for Scream 6, I think that most of the ingredients that those of us love the Scream franchise for and go to these movies for still works very well here. Even 6 movies in, a lot of the charm, a lot of the setup, some of the meta nature, the nature of Ghostface as a killer being, you know, somebody that's a whodunit, could be multiple characters, could be one character, it's always somebody different, and having to figure that out throughout the movie, that whodunit nature, the formula, the template, the ingredients, whatever you want to call it, of the Scream magic is still mostly working 6 movies in. I also really like this new cast that we were introduced to in Scream 5. I think they are more than capable of carrying at least a trilogy, maybe even further than that in this franchise, to the point where I really don't miss any of the legacy characters that aren't here anymore or decided not to be in this movie. I could have even really done without Gale, to be honest with you, but we'll get more into that later. The 4 core characters, the core 4 as they're known of in the movie, with Sam and Tara, the 2 sisters, and the 2 twins, the niece and nephew of Randy, I think they're very fun characters. They have a really good dynamic with each other. They all have their own little complications, their own little personality quirks, and they're just a lot of fun to watch. So that's one of the biggest hurdles that they had, trying to kind of reinvent this franchise with 5, and I think that they have succeeded thus far with that cast of characters. I almost put this in the mixed category, but I think I definitely lean more positive on it, and I think that the kills in this movie are pretty solid. There's not a ton of creativity or variety to them. It's still pretty much Scream style stabs. It's a lot of gut stabs and face stabs and things like that, but they turn up the intensity quite a bit. It's a lot meaner, it's a lot more violent. The gore that they choose to show you is pretty plentiful in this one. There's a solid argument that this is the goriest and bloodiest of any of the Scream films. And so while I don't necessarily get my creativity there as far as the conceptualizing of these kills and the executions, you know, no pun intended, I do appreciate the fact that they at least ramped up the intensity of what they typically go for. And I actually think that they utilized the New York setting well. I've heard a lot of people say that they could have done more, that they didn't do too much with it, and I gotta respectfully disagree on that one. I think that they did plenty with it. I don't know what else they could have done aside from have a huge fight scene in Times Square or have Ghostface throw somebody off of Empire State Building. You get sequences in subways, the alleyways are there. I mean, you got sequences where Ghostface chases somebody into their apartment and it's a high rise, and so the only way that they can get out to safety is by, you know, getting out the window and trying to get out that way. So the new setting brings a lot of interesting dynamic change to this as far as how Ghostface kills, how much more public he is, and how many more things he will do in the public eye, knowing that there's just so much going on, so much chaos in New York that nobody's even going to see it. You New Yorkers, man, you fucking cold. And so I think the New York setting change actually added a good little bit of differentiation in this one. I think they did a good job with that. Moving on to the mixed aspect, one of the bigger ones for me is the utilization of Kirby, one of my favorite characters in this franchise, and one of the biggest things that I was excited for in this. Now, again, I do lean positive on this one, and maybe on a rewatch, it won't even be in the mix, it'll be in the positive, but I think that the main thing, the main draw to that character for a lot of us was that the personality that she had, to where she has all this like horror movie knowledge, and she was riffing back and forth with Rory Culkin, like who's the bigger horror fan, and there was something about her personality delivering that type of dialogue that just endeared me to her. And you only get like one little exchange of dialogue that represents that side of Kirby in this movie.
I hear you're a horror fan. It's been said.
Aside from that, she plays a very different role. I'm not going to say what, because it's a cool little scene whenever she's revealed into the movie, and it's like, there's the entrance of Kirby, but her role within the group, what she is there to actually do for everybody, is very different than where she was before. Some people will really like that. I didn't dislike it, but I missed a little bit of that classic Kirby that I missed from Scream 4. Also, Gale being in this movie. Now, I said in my video talking about my hopes and worries for Scream 6 that, Gale, of the three main OG characters of Sidney, Dewey, and Gale, is my least favorite of the three. I don't dislike the character, but Dewey is a character that has this weird, quirky charm to him. Sidney is arguably the greatest final girl of all time. And Gale is a good character, but she's the one that's least essential to me at this point. She had her function in the first couple of films, being the reporter that had to be switched on her thoughts on Sidney, the one that wrote the book that eventually became the Stab franchise, and of course the love interest for Dewey. And beyond Scream 5, her having to be there for the emotional reaction to what happened to Dewey, even in that film, I kind of felt like she was added. She was, supplementary. And so in this film, even though she has a really good scene in it, the one that's in the trailers, if you yank her out of this movie, I genuinely don't think the movie has changed at all. And my final mixed aspect is that this is the only movie of these six where I feel like the meta horror movie commentary felt a little forced. It felt like it was shoehorned in. It was really heavy-handed. I don't know if it's because it doesn't mix well with the direction they're going, where they're diving more into social commentary and not just horror movie rules and tropes, but the classic scene that's in all these movies where all the main characters sit down and go, okay, Ghostface is back. Here's the new set of rules. Last time we were dealing with requels, and now we're dealing with a requel sequel, which isn't the same as a regular sequel, so the rules of that don't apply. It just seems way too much. I don't know if it's just because it's gone on too far. I don't know if it's because a requel sequel in and of itself just sounds ridiculous to me, but that whole scene and anything that dove into that horror movie rules, the Randy scene, it just didn't work for me this time. And I don't know how you make a Scream film where that element feels out of place, but they did. I don't know if it's because we've gone on to 6 films now, so that thing's just inherently starting to seem a little far-fetched. I don't know if it's the actress instead of Jamie Kennedy, that it just doesn't come across the same way. Maybe the goofy nature of Jamie Kennedy made it a little more palatable. I don't know if it's because it's only been a year since the last Scream film, so the nostalgia thing of like, man, I just want that Scream element back that we had in Scream 4 and then in Scream 5 that had like over a decade break. Maybe that's what's changed, but when it got to that stuff, it just felt like they were trying to shove it in there because they felt like it's part of the formula, we have to have it, when clearly the social commentary stuff worked significantly better in this than the horror movie rules, horror movie tropes, the Scream stuff, the meta stuff. And now moving on to the negatives. This is one of the few times to where I really only liked or cared about the prominent characters, meaning the core 4 and the 2 legacy characters that we got back. Gale being on the bottom of that list. Don't hate me. But all of the new characters, all the ones that come in that are the new friends or the new boyfriends or the new roommates, I didn't like any of them. I didn't think any of them got a whole lot to do. I didn't think any of them were very interesting. And so whether those characters survive to the next film, are one of the Ghostface killers, or are one of the victims, I didn't give a shit. And while we're talking about characters, I think acting-wise, everybody does a really solid job. Some do really well in this one. But Dermot Mulroney, I don't know what movie he thought he was in. Like, there's lines that he delivers that are supposed to be dead serious that come across as really corny. There's times where he's trying to be dead serious and angry. You know, he's the detective character and he's trying to be that grizzled detective. It just comes across ridiculous. Think like Chris Rock in Spiral. There's times where it almost seems cartoonish what he's trying to do. Like, I really genuinely don't understand if they were directing him to be that way or if that was his choice, but he was completely off almost the entire film for me. And that leads me to the biggest issue that I have with this film, and that is from the moment that Ghostface is revealed to the time the credits roll, this thing went off a cliff for me. First and foremost, I did not like the Ghostface reveal. I didn't like the identity of Ghostface, and I also did not like the motivation of Ghostface. And it did not help, and I swear to God, because there's some people that always doubt when people say this, like, oh yeah, sure you did. I swear to God, within 7 minutes of this film, I had it pegged. There was something that happens in the opening of this film, which I did not talk about in my positives. I like the opening. The opening is actually pretty creative. But the creative opening, they try to subvert your expectations with, and it creates this question in your brain about how did that happen? And that question only had one logical answer to me about how that could have happened, and that immediately honed me in on which of the characters I was just introduced to is got to be Ghostface. And I had the exact same thing happen in Scream 5. So either I've gotten older and I've just gotten used to the rules of Scream and it's so hard to surprise me now, or because these two films are written by the same people, they have done a terrible job, at least for me personally, at hiding the identity of Ghostface and actually surprising me or subverting my expectations in any way. Because at least in Scream 5, while I was pretty damn sure who the killer was throughout most of that film, there was at least moments where I started to doubt myself. Like, well, maybe. I don't know. That thing that person just said, maybe. All the way through Scream 6, every single time something like that was intended, like where somebody says something to try to make you direct your attention to them, or a red herring is introduced, and there's a ton of red herrings in this movie, every single one of them just solidified me even further that, no, that's a distraction. It's this person. It's got to be that person. And when that person was unmasked, I was going, fuck me, man. And that sucks when that's one of the main draws of a Scream film, is going on this whodunit journey and getting the Scooby-Doo third act, or like, haha, I'm actually the killer and here's the reasons why I did it. And when you're not surprised when the mask comes off, and then when the person starts talking and tells you why they did all the things that they did, you're just sitting there rolling your eyes going, oh, why the fuck did you do that? That takes the wind out of your sails with a Scream film. And it didn't stop there. For whatever reason, they decided that the movie where Ghostface is the meanest and the most brutal and the most unforgiving, and the kills are the meanest and the goriest and possibly the most danger that these characters have ever been in 6 films, in that same film, for whatever reason, they decided to give ungodly amounts of plot armor to characters, to where there are characters in this movie that get shot, that get stabbed. There are some that get stabbed multiple times. There are people that get turned into fucking Swiss cheese in this movie, and minutes later are walking around, running around, having full-on happy conversations like nothing happened. And in the third act, I'm talking about like one after another that happened, to where I audibly said, get the fuck out of here, in the theater when one person was revealed. Like, I'm okay, guys. I'm like, no, the fuck you are not. And that totally takes the stakes away. That totally takes away the investment of the tension, of the danger. You spent the whole movie solidifying this Ghostface, whether the identity and the motivation is stupid or not. That Ghostface, when in the costume and wielding the knife, is a bad motherfucker. And then you get here and it's like, but then who cares? Because it doesn't matter if you get stabbed or if you get shot. And the amount of disbelief that this movie asks you to suspend just for that alone is asinine. But it doesn't stop there. There are multiple times throughout this movie, and predominantly again in the third act, where characters do the dumbest possible fucking thing. And I know this is a slasher film. I understand in movies in general, you have to kind of stick to bullshit sometimes to make the story work. You gotta, have logic be thrown out the window a little bit here and there. You have to have characters do some dumb stuff to put them in danger. I get all of that. But you can only get away with so much before it starts to be a lot of attention drawn to it and you're going, okay, this is like the 8th time that somebody has done the dumbest possible thing in this scenario. It's too much. I mean, Ghostface being knocked down, the weapon getting flung across the room, and rather than grab the weapon and finish them, they just keep running, or things like that. I mean, there's one, I can't talk about it until I get to my spoiler review. There's one for the 3rd act of this film where I'm going, that makes no sense whatsoever. You wanted a cool scene, and you completely botched any sort of credibility to get to that scene. I mean, even in the one that we have in the trailer, so this isn't even a spoiler, where Gail is, being attacked by a Ghostface and she's got the gun and she's got the phone and she's like, yeah, I know, you're like the 11th dude to do this. I'm gonna shoot you in the fucking head. She's in a closet. A big ass walk-in closet that a rich motherfucker like Gail would have. It's basically a room with one door, one way in, one way out. The only way that Ghostface can get to her with a gun pointed at the door. You're safe. If he comes in, you got a full clip before he is even 5 feet from you. And what does she do? Walks out of the closet and starts walking into this open room where there's 19 different angles that Ghostface can come at her. And I was just like, dude, if any character is going to be that dumb, you can't do it to the one that has been going through this for fucking 30 years. She would know better by now. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened in the 3rd act of this film. Like, I'm dead honest with you when I tell you, like, up to the last 20, 25 minutes or so, I was actually, like, debating in my head. I was like, damn, is this my favorite Scream sequel? This has been pretty fucking good so far. And then it just went off a cliff, just one after another, where I was just like, oh. So I can't elaborate on a lot of this stuff. I'm gonna have to do a spoiler review. Like, this is a movie that I don't feel satisfied getting my thoughts out until I talk specifically about the things that are bugging me. So keep your eyes peeled on this channel. I will be doing a spoiler review. I don't know. I was flabbergasted at how much this movie went from like over a 4-star to me to whatever I land on by the time I sit down to edit this thing, but dropped quite a bit just in 20 minutes. Like, somebody else took over the writing, and it was like, I was shocked when I walked out. Like, how the fuck did you not land the plane? So overall, guys, even though I ended on the more passionate negative notes, this is still a solid movie. This is still a solid Scream movie. I will rewatch this. I'm actually anxious to rewatch it to see maybe how I can reinterpret certain things in the movie, knowing where things are going to go in the 3rd act. But nonetheless, it's pretty damn solid. If you're a Scream fan, this might not be your favorite. That might even be your least favorite, but it's still a pretty damn good time for slasher fans and for Scream fans. Just maybe temper your expectations from all of the early reactions that have hailed this as the greatest thing ever, because I didn't see that film. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed this, please click over here for all of my Scream reviews, and I'm also going to put my ranking of the Ghostface killers with Scream 5, so not including this Ghostface killer, no spoilers. Check that out, like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss all of the things coming in the future, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.